What fan theory about a movie, TV show, or video game do you see as 100% canon? In the Who Shot Mr. Burns episode of The Simpsons, Mr. Burns is discovered shortly after being shot and is surrounded by a number of characters, including Krusty the Clown. However, on close inspection it is absolutely irrefutable that it isn't Krusty at all, but Homer Simpson in Krusty makeup, compared to when Homer dressed up as Krusty while in clown college. Homer was actively on his way to kill Mr. Burns while disguised as Krusty, echoing when he saw Sideshow Bob rob the Quickie Mart while disguised as Krusty, but was beaten by mere seconds when Maggie shot him. On a somewhat similar note, Krusty was originally intended to be Homer in disguise. The idea was that Bart had no respect for Homer but worshipped Krusty. And that's why Krusty looks like Homer with clown makeup. Wait, so when Randy's music career took off in the guise of Lord, then he used that to connect with his kids. Fucking Simpsons already did it. All of the time manipulation in Breath of the Wild, pausing, flurry rush, bullet time, etc., are actually canon and are part of Link's champion ability. All of the champions have an special ability, and as the Hylian champion it makes sense for Link to have one too. There is a great video by Nintendo Black Crisis about this. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=tv5zwwdnfso that explains most of this, but I wanted to add that this goes along with his character throughout the series. Link is strongly associated with time, e.g. Hero of Time, and the timeline split. Many of the games are associated with time, Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and the official timeline is contingent on it. It fits the lore of Bot W and explains why he is so overpowered, and I just think it's a really cool theory. That makes a lot of sense. I'd like to add a little bit that I read somewhere. The powers granted him by the Triforce of Courage are not super clear like they are from Zelda's and Ganon's pieces. The theory is that the power it gives him is what we see as a game over screen. He gets to die and redo whatever he needs to do to stop Ganon. Jeremy Renner in Tag is Hawkeye while he's on vacation from the Avengers. My headcanon is that all of Jeremy Renner's movie characters are the same person. He's a bomb-disposing, pill-taking super soldier, who also helps out with the IMF and the Avengers. My headcanon is that all of Jeremy Renner's movie characters are the same person. That explains why he's such a great shot in Wind River. Must have been weird for him to see Scarlet Witch pretend to be a powerless FBI agent. Jack from Titanic never existed, he was entirely made up by Rose as a fantasy. For a movie that put so much effort into being as historically accurate as possible, one starts seeing a pattern where most of the mistakes revolve around Jack. He carries gear that hadn't been invented yet, he references places that didn't exist until after the Titanic sunk, and was all around exactly what a rich person would think a happy poor person was like. That it just makes way more sense that he was fictional even in universe. Copy/paste where I typed it out in a comment. She was getting married to someone she didn't love for the sake of money. Cal may not even have been that bad of a guy, but she didn't like him, so she tells everybody he was horrible. And then, well, it's the freaking Titanic, an event so mentally scarring and awful we're still talking about it over 100 years later. It was so awful she can't stand to think about it, unless something good happened. And suddenly there is Jack. This lovable scamp that just sweeps her off her feet in a torrid romance with someone who loves her for her and not her money, where she learns that poor people have incredible dance parties and are happy, and everything is just so romantic and perfect. And the details about Jack are just wrong. Jack talks about riding the roller coaster at Santa Monica Pier until he threw up, but that coaster wasn't built until 1916. The Titanic sank in 1912. Jack talks about ice fishing on Lake Wissota. That's a man-made reservoir that wasn't created until 1917. The buttons on Jack's borrowed coat are actually from a famous designer that created them in 1922. The song they dance to in steerage was written by a man who wasn't even born until 1923. Jack's rucksack is a standard-issue Swedish military bag, first made in 1939. Just over and over again the anachronisms and continuity errors circle around Jack. Things that a rich person thinks poor people would say or do, using places and songs and props that didn't actually exist at the time. Even other filming mistakes make more sense this way. We see Jack and Rose running around in the ship as it floods. The water is horizontal with the floor. The ship would have been tilting by that point, which means the water level should have been diagonal. Very hard to film that, but if Rose as a rich white woman was one of the first ones in a lifeboat, she would have been imagining what it would be like to be in a sinking ship, and hence her description would be wrong. AKA, Rose was making something up to help her deal with the horror she lived through and splice the narrative together over the years after the fact. And the only solid evidence that even comes close to backing her story up, the drawing? It's not like it's signed by Jack. And it was found in Cal's belongings, safely tucked away. Which is more likely, that Jack is real and perfect in every way, and that for some reason jealous angry Cal got his hands on the drawing and kept it without ever mentioning it, or that maybe Cal had someone draw it while on the ship as glorified wank bank material and squirreled it away, and Rose just worked that into her fantasy. Your theory is the only answer that makes any sense. The North Atlantic was about 33 degrees Fahrenheit. They'd have died from hypothermia running around in the sinking ship like that. Water does not magically warm up just because it is indoors. Courage the cowardly dog doesn't really live in the middle of nowhere, but because of Muriel's age he never leaves their house or property. Every visitor is a monster because he of course, doesn't know them and sees them as a threat. As I got older I realized he's exactly what the title says he is, a cowardly dog, and no one was evil or out to get anyone. I mean, that naughty barber episode was pretty creepy. Pretty sure the barber was a vet, but Courage saw him as a barber because he was planning to cut off his hair. A relatively normal procedure if there's something wrong with your dog's skin. So question is, what was wrong with Courage that resulted in the vet coming to cut off his hair? That Emperor Palpatine siphoned off Padme's life energy to preserve Darth Vader in Revenge of the Sith. Lucas could easily have said she died in childbirth. Padme had just been suffocated by Anakin and gave birth to twins would have been a plausible death. Also Yoda could have witnessed the birth of the twins and been the one to split them up. That would explain why Obi-Wan doesn't know there is another in Empire. Damn, never thought of that. Evidently when Empire was written Obi-Wan wasn't supposed to know. I hand wave it as Obi-Wan not realizing Leia could use the Force. I think Palpatine gave Anakin the nightmares about Padme. At the start of the film, Palpatine remarks that Anakin had at some point told him about what happened to his mother and the Tusken Raiders. I speculate that Palpatine may have also been told about the nightmares that led Anakin to his mom, and that this gave him an idea on how to turn Anakin by making him fear the loss of another loved one. Palpatine, at some point, figured out that this loved one was Padme. So, using his mastery of the dark side of the Force, Palpatine channels a vision into Anakin's dreams that ultimately becomes a motivation for him to turn. While revealing himself to Anakin, Palpatine startles Anakin when he promises that his power can save your wife from certain death. This quote further supports this theory, as how else would Palpatine know what troubled him if he hadn't been the one behind that trouble in the first place? Being the master manipulator Palpatine is, it's not that far-fetched to think that he would be the one conjuring those visions into Anakin, as ultimately that's what ended up boosting Anakin's curiosity in the dark side. The reason the glass slipper in Cinderella didn't turn back to a regular slipper, or disappear, at midnight is because the fairy godmother was messing with us. Her main goal was to set Cinderella up for life, and to do that she needed a way for the prince to find her. She could easily have magicked Cinderella into the life she wanted, arbitrary midnight deadline be damned, but instead the fairy godmother decided to make the prince want her for her own qualities and to prove his love by tracking Cinderella down. It's like the theory in Aladdin that it's all in pursuit of his first wish, that is, to make Aladdin a prince. He He doesn't become a prince until he marries Jasmine and the Sultan changes the rules. Until then, he only appears to be a prince. Until that point, the genie is acting in pursuit of a larger goal. Magic users are tricksy. Now do Gandalf. That dude was a master manipulator who says that magic must never be used until absolutely necessary, just like Tolkien himself. Right, fireworks and smoke rings are also extremely necessary. As soon as it begins to rain, he teleports to a cabin with a warm fire. Very niche theory, but I 100% believe that the Disney film Atlantis, The Lost Empire and the Mass Effect game series take place in the same universe. You talked about one of the best Disney movies ever made. I'm gonna need you to explain. Reply. Give award. Share. Report. Save. Level 3. Marathic. 1.1k points. 1 day ago. Bravo. Mind blown. Silver. Alright, well, this will take a good long while, but you asked for it, so buckle up. Also should probably mention that this will contain spoilers for Mass Effect and touches on the much maligned RGB ending for the series. Also this will mostly be a list of similarities between the two series, but in the end I'll give a TLDR which will include a brief synopsis on how I think Atlantis fits in the Mass Effect timeline. First, let's start with the creature that initially inspired this theory, the Great Leviathan, which guards the entrance to Atlantis. It is a lobster-esque synthetic organism which shoots beams of fire from its maw, which, if you've played Mass Effect, sounds eerily similar to the Reapers, the titular villains of the series. Now I will say for the theory's narrative that I don't think the Leviathan is a Reaper. There are some dissimilarities, chief of which being that the Leviathan isn't hell-bent on the destruction of the Atlanteans themselves, but I am saying that it could be based on Reaper tech. Speaking of tech, the Atlanteans each wear a bluish crystal around their neck. This crystal, when used in proximity to the heart of Atlantis, more on that later, can power technology, be used to create force fields, and can even extend the lives of those wearing the crystals, and, I propose, that in the future, humanity would come to know this material as element 0, or EZO. When an electrical current runs through EZO, it produces something called a mass effect field, which can be used to propel ships through space and create force fields. Additionally, creatures exposed to EZO early in development develop an ability called biotics, which allow them to manipulate mass effect fields to their advantage. One of the only races to have inherent biotic abilities are the Asari, who, it should be noted, can live to be 1,000 years old. However, the Asari didn't come by those biotic abilities naturally. In Mass Effect 3, we learn that the Asari were uplifted by a more advanced alien race known as the Protheans. This uplifting included providing the Asari with technology, and altering their DNA to better suit their needs. In turn, the Asari saw them as gods. However, when the Reapers arrived, the Protheans had to abandon the Asari, leaving behind a beacon in the form of an artificial intelligence. Which brings us to the heart of Atlantis. It is the source of the Atlanteans' power, but it's also described as being alive somehow. It can also choose a host to act as its conduit, but if the host is exposed to the heart of Atlantis for too long, they can be lost to it forever, which, I argue, is exactly what happens to Shepard in the Control ending of Mass Effect 3. Now I'll just be honest here, this is mostly inspired by the fact that the AI Catalyst and Crystalline Kita looked eerily similar to me. In conclusion, here is how I think Atlantis, the Lost Empire, fits into the universe of Mass Effect. Atlantis and the Atlanteans were an experiment by the Protheans to uplift humanity, but the Protheans were forced to abandon Atlantis before they could spread that technology to the rest of the world. However, they did not leave Atlantis alone. In their absence, they left behind an artificial intelligence to watch over the fledgling human colony, which would later come to be known as the Heart of Atlantis. With this advanced technology, the Atlanteans prospered, but King Koshkim-Nedake, while trying to use the heart of Atlantis as a weapon, accidentally activated a defense protocol, leading him to believe their demise was caused by the gods being displeased with his actions. In activating this protocol, the heart sunk Atlantis beneath the sea, lost to the rest of the world until the events of the movie. There's also some other little things I didn't mention, like there being an alien script is Mass Effect, which I think looks extremely similar to Atlantean, and also the fact that the book leading to Atlantis is called The Shepherd's Journal. I mean, come on. Needless to say, you could probably poke 1,000 holes in this theory, but I think it's fun, so I like to believe it. Just finished Mass Effect 2 and now all I want to do is watch Atlantis. I have faith in your theory, kind stranger. In Ant-Man and the Wasp and the rest of the MCU, the reason Pym particles are so inconsistent in their behavior is because, when creating them, Hank Pym accidentally tapped into the same dimensional energy that Doctor Strange and his fellow sorcerers use, this time originating from the quantum realm. I also like the theory that only Hank Pym actually understands the particles, and he constantly explains them incorrectly on purpose because he doesn't want anyone else to misuse them. Or that he actually does not know how they work but is too arrogant to tell anyone that he really does not have a full grasp on the particles and their behavior. This is much more consistent with Pym from the comics too. He regularly fucks up and needs the other, smarter heroes to fix his shit. If he was as intelligent as he thinks he is, he'd surely be part of the Illuminati, but they never even considered him. That toys in the Toy Story universe freeze up by instinct. An instinct that is so good it will probably never fail. It's why Buzz freezes up in the first film despite not knowing he's a toy, and how they always seem to be able to freeze up at the mere sound of a door opening and things like that. Every close call they have is really them worrying for no reason. If the human got closer to seeing them, the instinct would have kicked in. Also, they can break the instinct the same way we can manually control our breath, which is how Woody talks to Sid in the first film. Toy Story 4 made the rules of their world very odd regarding the whole Forky thing. I thought it actually made sense that Forky doesn't have that instinct to freeze, considering he was never originally made as a toy, more like a Frankenstein's monster. It's what differentiates him from actual toys, and I imagine the same would apply to Bonnie's newest creation at the end of her first day of first grade. I just loved how it immediately dove into the weirdness with Forky having an existential crisis the moment he gains sentience. Kevin McAllister from Home Alone grows up to become Jigsaw from Saw. That would mean Saw has to take place in like 2050 though. Makes sense that Jigsaw uses ancient and archaic traps and torture, from the early 2000s. Hey, the recent Jigsaw movie was riddled with anachronisms and discrepancies with the timeline, so why not? The Flintstones and the Jetsons take place in the same post-apocalyptic time frame where the wealthy would escape to sky cities and flying cars, and the poor would rebuild society as cavemen. It would certainly explain how everyone in Bedrock celebrates Christmas, has traffic lights, etc. In Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, in a chapter called The Forbidden Forest, Harry is saved from Quirrell/Voldemort by Firenze the Centaur. They encounter Bane and Ronan, who had previously remarked Mars is bright tonight, and the two centaurs chastise Firenze for interfering with what the stars had laid out. Harry later wonders whether the stars said that Voldemort would kill him in the forest that night, and whether that's what the centaurs believed would happen without Firenze's involvement. In the final book, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, Harry realizes that his destiny is to be killed by Voldemort in order for the latter's Horcruxes to all be destroyed completely. He decides to go through with sacrificing himself for the cause, returning to the Forbidden Forest to confront Voldemort unarmed. The chapter ends with Voldemort successfully casting the killing curse at Harry, who appears to die. Although this is never explicitly stated or even implied at any point, my firm belief is that this encounter is what the centaurs read in the stars 6 years previously, not the one that happened in Philosopher's Stone, as they expected. What with divination being among the most difficult of magical arts to practice, they got the what right, mostly, but got the when completely wrong. The chapter in which Harry is killed is even called The Forest Again, probably as a reference to that first chapter in which his death was foreseen. Speaking of Harry Potter, I have a theory that I posted before. Neville has such a terrible memory because of an obliviate spell gone wrong after witnessing his parents' torture. I also love this theory, I think it fits perfectly. With regard to Star Wars, I always liked to believe that there was hidden aspect to duels we never saw. While fighting with lightsabers, they were constantly trying to push each other off balance, or turn off their opponent's lightsaber. And that's why they spend so much time doing dumb shit like spinning around for no reason. To my knowledge, it's explained as the Force users can see or sense well the opponents move like a second into the future, so they're trying to throw them off to land a decisive blow. I have a theory that Olaf is an extension of Elsa's consciousness. Everything he does is really Elsa trying to help her sister. Yeah, I think that's pretty much canon. He repeats things he heard the sisters say to each other, like "the sky's awake" and "I like warm hugs," and displays some very Elsa-like behavior as the movie goes on, "because I love you I insist you run," and nearly melting trying to warm Anna up. His sole desire at the start of his life is to experience summer, something Elsa would never have gotten to do growing up, and in Olaf's Frozen adventure, he wants to take part in all of the Christmas festivities that she couldn't. He has a childish personality because a part of Elsa never really moved on from when she was 8. Marshmallow represents her desire to be left alone and safe. He looks and acts intimidating, and lashes out when he feels threatened, even if the threat is actually minor, but is ultimately kind.